you. Thank you very much and welcome. I'm Father Mitch Pacwa and welcome to Threshold of Hope, where we take a look at the writings of the church. And before we get to that though, I want to mention that today is the feast of St. Pio of Pietrelcina in Italy. He joined the Franciscans of the Capuchins branch, and he served in Gargano and in San Giovanni Rotondo in Italy, over on the east side, kind of south. Pretty poor area. You know, that's not a real fertile area, and it's a tough life over there. He especially is known for having suffered quite a bit, not only from some illnesses, but also from experiencing the stigmata. And that caused great pain for 50 years, from 1918 until 1968 when he died. But he didn't look at that pain as a failure, nor as the sicknesses. Didn't mean he enjoyed them, but he saw that even in the difficulties and the pain of life, Christ helps use us. And he understood that that suffering was for the good of others. And with all that, he also had an enormous number of spiritual gifts. He didn't write many books. His main writings are in letters. But he was especially known for his ability to be a great confessor. And he wasn't anything of the kind of guy, oh, well, I'm sure you didn't mean to do it. He was kind of cranky. And even Pope John Paul II in the canonization homily said he was kind of harsh. But the amazing thing is that people kept coming to him. He told them the truth, not because of his own ego, not because he didn't like them, but because he liked what was true and good. And he loved Christ, and he wanted people to be holy. And he didn't want to say, oh, it doesn't matter what you do, you just be whatever you are, and you just love God, and that's it. No, he called sinners out, and sometimes he would say, you're not sorry, get out of here. And they'd be mad, but then as they thought about it, they said, no, he's right, I'm not sorry. And then they'd go and repent, and then come back, sometimes 2 or 3 times, you know, but they'd repent. And that's why 100,000 people came to his funeral. And I think 300,000 to his canonization. And even this morning, there were 10,000 people at the Mass of his feast day. So he, by telling the truth in a strong, sometimes harsh, but still loving way, he was able to win over many, many people. All right. We are now going through, oh, by the way, let me point something out to you. You might not be able to see it real well, but now our little statue of Pope St. John Paul has a halo. He, you know, no bells rang, nothing like that. It's not like the movie, but you know, now that he's canonized, he gets to have a halo. So, and one of the very, very clever folks who works here was able to do that, not I. Don't touch any tools, Father. All right. We are in Fides et Ratio. You can get a paperback copy of this encyclical by going to EWTN's Religious Catalog. Online, it's EWTNreligiouscatalog.com. Or you can phone them at 1-800-854-6316. You can also, if you prefer, download a free electronic copy of Fides et Ratio by going to EWTN.com, our website. Go to the document library. You'll see libraries and document library. Type in Fides et Ratio, and you can download it for free and put it in your computer and read off the computer, or you can print it out. But you have to pay for your own ink and paper if you print it out. Right, now, I'd love to have you involved and participate in the show. You can do like all these nice people have done from the Philadelphia area and nearby New Jersey, and coming over here to Birmingham, right here in Irondale, Alabama. Or you can send a question by sending an email to threshold@EWTN.com, or call us during the live broadcast, which is at 1-800-221-9460. Or if you're outside North America or inside Birmingham, call 205-271-2980. We are on paragraph 89. And if you recall, this section began in paragraph 85, in which we talk about 5 dangers that are around that we want to avoid, 5 dangers of thought. One of them was the idea that you would be eclectic. That is, just pick and choose any little idea and just sort of what I called then the Mr. Potato Head approach to thinking, just mixing and matching ideas that don't fit. Another is historicism, saying everything from the historical past is no longer relevant. You know, that's old time language, we don't use that anymore. Instead of paying attention to the truth that goes over time. The third we talked about last week was scientism, where if you can't show it to me scientifically, I don't want to know it. Well, all right, as we said then, prove to me through science that the scientific method is scientific. You can't. So you have to take it on faith. So that science doesn't answer every question. It answers a lot of great questions, but not every question, such as, why are you doing certain scientific experiments? Is your science ethical? Those are the kind of questions we have to deal with. Now, today, in paragraph 89, we're dealing with the 4th issue, which is pragmatism. Now, people, especially we Americans, are known for being very pragmatic. Give us some duct tape, we'll fix anything. You know, that's all we need, very, very easy. But you try to get things done, and Americans have been known for all kinds of wonderful inventiveness. And a lot of great things come from America, or some things might have been invented elsewhere, but taken to a new level here in the United States. And so we're known for being pragmatic. Now, here's what he means by pragmatism, though, where you make that a philosophy. It's not bad to be pragmatic. You got to get things done. That's not a problem. It's when you make pragmatism into a philosophy. And what he means is that in pragmatism, you make choices. You make different kinds of decisions. But you don't include, you just keep out theoretical considerations, or you keep out judgments based on ethics. Now, think of how that affected us. How many corporations in the past dumped all kinds of waste into the drinking water or the water table? For them, it was the pragmatic issue. We can make a profit, and the profit margin will be higher if we just dump it in the water. But, you know, if you kill off the potential customers by poisoning their water, how pragmatic is that? Just from a pragmatic view, that's not very pragmatic. And more importantly, you don't have a right to destroy the environment around you. Just because you can make money, you don't have the right to destroy other people's ability to live off the water you're polluting. You know, you can't do that. And that would be, a lot of folks were just into the pragmatic to make money. And but there are other reasons people do pragmatism too, that they just they don't care about ethics. Now, on a practical basis, this mode of thinking has some very significant consequences, as we've seen with pollution, for instance. You know, pollution is nasty. And even though certain forms of heat were cheap, you know, it really has improved our cities to get rid of coal stoves and coal ovens. I remember growing up, you know, everything was coal in Chicago, and the city just had this haze. Since they got rid of the coal-burning furnaces, then you just don't have that. So, you know, there's some real consequences. Now, that's a good consequence to get rid of that pollution. But there's also another kind of consequence. It's where people have an idea of democracy which is not grounded in any reference to unchanging values. In other words, if we vote for something that has been held as true on principle, but we don't like it anymore, if we vote for against that old principle, then our vote overcomes the principle. Think of certain societies. We've had situations where voting, well, we can do it in a couple ways. Let's start off with the Supreme Court. In the 1850s, in the Dred Scott decision, voting to say that people whose roots are from Africa are subhuman. Now, they voted on it, and it was the Supreme Court. And that was exactly the debate between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas. Lincoln was saying, no, there's an older principle that God created everybody with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. His opponents in the Democrat Party of the time, led by Mr. Stevens, said, no, the Supreme Court decided this. And it's the law. So we have to defend it. And then later on, when the Supreme Court in the 1890s said you can have separate facilities for people of color, so long as they're equal, then the states began to vote to keep those facilities separate. And that African Americans had to go to some places and whites to others. Now, they voted, but did that make it right? Not at all. There was nothing moral about that. The earlier principle that being a human is what gives you your rights is more important than all those states that voted. And then we can, of course, see that the states, for a while, the states were voting. When you put it up to the people, the states voted against abortion. But when the legislature of New York said, no, we're not going to ask the people, we're just going to vote because we want abortion. And then when the Supreme Court made that decision, then it was principle, a law. And that becomes the law. And we see this going on now with marriage. All over the country, states vote in favor of marriage being on the basis of the old principle that a man and a woman form a marriage. Because only a man and a woman can procreate children. But the Supreme Court has made decisions, and a number of other courts, lower courts, have made decisions that undercut the old principle as well as the votes. And they do their own voting. So, this is something where, you say, wait a second. It sounds on the basis of pragmatism, you can just vote these things away. But that's not the way that reality works. And so, and they vote whether or not a line of action is admissible whether something is moral, will all depend on the vote of a parliamentary majority, or in our case, a court. Or sometimes too, where we have voted in the Congress to declare certain drugs illegal. Now, they say the Attorney General says, well, I don't feel like enforcing the drug laws anymore, so I'll leave it up to the states. And he was told by the president, don't enforce the Protection of Marriage Act anymore. Defense of marriage. Don't enforce that. And then states could vote these things around. So is that good principle? See, that would be pragmatic, but is it good principle? Now here he quotes Pope John Paul quotes his encyclical, Evangelium Vitae, paragraph 69, where he says there, in the democratic culture of our time, especially in the West, it is commonly held that the legal system of any society should limit itself to taking account of and accepting the convictions of the majority. That's what we take. It should be, therefore, based solely upon what the majority itself considers moral and actually practices. But did that work out very well after the 1933 election in Germany? No. Basic human laws were broken. And the same thing with the Jim Crow laws in this country, that they were immoral laws and needed to be opposed on earlier principles. And you can't just say, well, we voted for them. It's not enough. All the principles have to be taken into account. The consequences of this are clear. In practice, the great moral decisions of humanity are subordinated to decisions taken one after another by institutional agencies. So various institutions change the morality. And we see that they have a big effect. And it's interesting to see how some of these things go back and forth. If you don't act on principle, you will act on whim. And what's popular now will become unpopular later. Right now we just had this weekend huge protests against global warming. And poor New York City, bless their hearts. I mean, they had to put up with these 400,000 people protesting global warming and leaving behind them tons of trash. That's not fair to the garbage men. But then back in the 70s, remember the front cover of Time magazine, I think it was, that the big problem is the big freeze, that everything is freezing. And it's going to be these kind of, fads that keep coming and going. Remember, coffee was no good. Coffee's good for you. Margarine is good for you. No, it's not any good for you. Even our diet becomes Simon Says. So, and one of the things is that anthropology. Now, by anthropology, remember, he means it in this way. How you understand what it means to be human. Understanding the nature of being human. That's what anthropology is. It means the study of humanity. Anthropos is man. So it's the study of mankind, of humanity. And it will be severely compromised by a one-dimensional vision of the human being. In other words, if you see, we're modern, and we've got a modern view of human beings, and therefore that's the one dimension we're going to focus on. Well, remember, Hitler taught that it was the modern science that certain nations are inferior to his. He believed that it was science. And it was bad science. I mentioned it last week that Charles Darwin did teach that Africans are subhuman. And Hitler said, well, that's science. But he was wrong. Darwin was wrong. Hitler was wrong. And it can happen on so many levels besides race. That you have this false teachings, one-dimensional vision of human beings, a vision that excludes the ethical dilemmas that we have to deal with. And then also the meaning, what is the lived meaning, the existential meaning of suffering, of sacrifice, of life and death? Is suffering just so meaningless that we are going to take a vote that doctors can kill you? That's what they did in some states already. Was it Oregon and Washington? Yeah, and Hawaii. Yeah, that you can kill yourself. And now they've voted in, I believe, Belgium, that if your child is terminally ill, you can kill the child without the child's permission, up through age 12. At least in the pagan days, the Romans limited it to age 7. Now they extended it. So, this is something that we have to take a look at and say, no, the inalienable right to life is something that you don't vote away on any basis. Race, sickness, old age, mental ability, physical ability. None of that votes away your rights. So that's some of the problems with the some people say, but it's not pragmatic. What good is somebody who's just laying there? They don't do anything for you that you can see, but perhaps the people who don't do anything and can't do anything for themselves are actually teaching you a kind of gentleness that you won't learn from anybody else until you take care of them. Taking care of your terminally ill relatives, taking care of those who are handicapped, make us more gentle. And actually, even sociologists have pointed that out. Societies that take care of the vulnerable members tend to be more gentle ones. Those who kill the vulnerable members of the society tend to become more violent societies. And may I point out at this point that in the first year after Roe versus Wade, where the most vulnerable people in our society, children in the womb, began to be killed, in that first year after that decision, the murder rate for children 5 and under went up by 100%. In 1 year. No group has ever experienced a 100% increase in death rate until after Roe v. Wade. So how's that working out? Yeah. All right, our fifth element in paragraph 90 is what he calls the nihilists. Now, nihil is a Latin word that means nothing. These are the people who believe that life is nothing. There's no meaning, no purpose. And this is, as he points out, it's a more general conception. It has a common framework for a lot of philosophies, a lot of different kinds of nihilists out there. Think back on plays like Waiting for Godot. Did you ever see that? So it's a play that was written, I think, in the 1950s. And there are other plays like it. There's this whole existentialist. I knew one guy who was in charge of the theater department at a high school, and he would put on these kind of plays all the time for high school kids. I said, what happened to Guys and Dolls? You can sing along. And one of the priests was walking out of a place. Is there a concession here where they sell razor blades to slit your wrists? I mean, this was a whole type of play that was deep, meaningful. It's boring as all get out. So at any rate, so there are a lot of different philosophies that are nihilist. And they've rejected that being, that just existing, has any meaning. They reject that. They don't believe that there's any meaning to life. You have people like Jean-Paul Sartre, who said that life is absurd. And that's why he wrote plays like Nausea. Who wants to write a play about nausea? Usually want to get over that. He dwells on it. Or no exit. That there's no way out of here, and so on. And he, by the way, he struggled with suicide all his life long because even he couldn't live by this philosophy. Though until I was told that right before he died, he came back to his Catholic faith and received the sacraments and he got rid of that. But still, this kind of rejection that there's any meaning in life is what we mean by nihilism. There's nothing there. It's purposeless. On one hand, nihilists deny all the foundations for reality or truth or meaning. There's no basis for anything. It's all nothing. And also, they negate all objective truth, except their own, that there is no meaning. So they consider objective, but otherwise there's nothing there. Now, of course, as Pope points out, this goes flat against Scripture. You can't be a Christian and a nihilist. That just doesn't work. God says, I made you for myself. And that's why we learned in the Catechism, who made me? These are the old timers like me. We had the Baltimore Catechism, right? Why did God make me? And where are those nuns that taught us to remember this? Because you didn't go to grammar school last year, did you? No, neither did I. And so, I won't ask when. But no matter how much, we learn that there's a purpose to life. Nihilists say, no, there's nothing there. And by the way, nihilists are like vegetarian restaurants. Ever go to a vegetarian restaurant? Look around at the faces. Watch all, believe me, I'm not against vegetarian diet. That's good for you, I'm sure. But whenever I've gone to a vegetarian restaurant, I've noticed nobody is smiling. Not one. They all look so glum. So people at vegetarian restaurants and nihilists have a lot in common. They're not smiling. And nihilism is a denial of being human. Humans tend to be moving forward and with purpose. They say, no, that's just a joke. It's ridiculous. And it's false. And the very identity of being a human, saying they're human, people like Peter Singer at Princeton University to say, there's no difference between you and the rights of a cockroach. None. Hope nobody bigger than he steps on him. It should never be forgotten that the neglect of being inevitably leads to losing touch with objective truth and the very ground, the very basis of human dignity. Once you accept a nihilist idea, then other people are just tools in your tool case. You don't see them as having dignity, and if you are a nihilist, you don't see yourself as having dignity. You reject that. And this is something that goes against the very nature of humanity. This in turn makes it possible to erase from the face of man and woman the marks of the likeness to God. I can't help but think a good number of the people who have joined some of these terror groups around the country have more of a nihilist idea than a Muslim idea. In Islam, they teach very clearly that God created everybody. But these people don't see the dignity even of vulnerable children. And they crucify small children. They cut their heads off and put them on sticks. You know, this is something that you say, I can't help but see that this is nihilist. And how they think they can go to the paradise God created, which is meant for human beings. This is something that is highly problematic. And then we also see that they leads them little by little, either to destructive will to power. Does that not fit what's going on with these people? These groups in Iraq, and Syria, Somalia. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're talking about ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Islamic, Jamia Islamiyya. It doesn't matter. All these groups, they have no regard for anybody else, and they want power. And they'll destroy anybody who gets in their way. Or they go to a solitude without hope. They become isolated, depressed, and miserable to be with. Once the truth is denied to human beings, it is a pure illusion to think you can set them free. If you don't let people know the truth of God, of having the dignity of being created in the image and likeness of God, if you remove those truths, if you remove the truth of thinking about what is good versus evil, and that you say, I don't want to do evil, which is a deprivation of the good, I want to do the good. If you remove all that, you'll never have freedom. Never. Truth and freedom either go together hand in hand, or they both perish in complete misery. And this is what we see happening over there and in many, many places. And as we should point out, we're appalled, rightfully, at the beheading of 3 journalists. That sort of brought it home to the West. But what about the thousands of Christians who are being killed? What about the thousands of Yazidis? And even thousands more of other Muslims who are being killed by them. They kill more Muslims than anybody. So this is just, it reminds me of Jesus casting the demons out of the man, and they went into the pigs, and because they said, we don't want to go back to hell, send us into that herd of swine. And what happens? As soon as they get in there, they destroy the swine and end up in hell anyway. Because it's the nature of evil to be self-destructive. That's what happened to communism, happened to Nazism, and so many other groups. Imperialism, the empires all collapsed. It's the Pope also has a footnote where he goes back to his encyclical, Redemptor Hominis. We did that almost 13 years ago we did that encyclical. But in paragraph 12 of Redemptor Hominis, it says, the words of Jesus in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, verse 32, you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free, contain both a fundamental requirement and a warning. The requirement of an honest relationship with regard to truth as a condition for authentic freedom. We have to desire the truth, whether it's a comfortable truth or not. We have to require it because it's true. Men and women complement each other. People of the same sex don't form marriage. It may not be a comfortable truth in our world, but this is a reality that you can't undo. But and the warning to avoid every kind of illusory freedom, every superficial, unilateral freedom, every freedom that fails to enter into the whole truth about man and the world. again, you can say, but this is my truth. And if I say that marriage is something that other than what it is, then that's what it is. No, you cannot change that. I mean, it's, you know, like I was explaining to a mom to explain to her daughter. If you have two plugs or two sockets side by side, what will turn on? Nothing. Nothing. Two sockets next to each other do nothing. You can click them all you want. Two plugs, you can click, nothing. You have to have the complementarity work together to turn on the lights. And this is the way with life. And so, you know, with marriage, that's just not an illusory truth, it's just a fact. This goes on in paragraph 12 of Redemptor Hominis. Today also, even after 2,000 years, we see Christ as the one who brings man freedom based on truth. He frees man from what curtails, diminishes, and as it were, breaks off this freedom at its root in man's soul, his heart, and his conscience. That's where the truth affects us most deeply. And therefore, we have to keep a love of the truth in a way that nihilists never can. And then we'll find an authentic freedom. Is that not why our own nation, that based its declaration of the independence, not on hatred of England or of King George, but we based our declaration of freedom on what we believe to be an absolute fact, that every single person has these inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, given not by the state, but given by the Creator. That's what they wrote. And then they ended that same Declaration of Independence with another truth, that our actions are judged by that Creator. That's at the end of the Declaration, part that people don't usually read. And that truth is what inspired all those people to seek freedom and to try and maintain it. And if we deny those truths, if we stifle it, if we don't let teachers teach that in our schools, then our freedom will be gone. Just as an example, take a look at the schools. As I've pointed out many times, they've taken out the Bible and they've taken out prayer. But they put in metal detectors. Then they took out the doors from the bathroom stalls. And now you can't even, one little boy got suspended because he chewed his Pop-Tart in the shape of a pistol. Back off, this Pop-Tart's loaded. Or you go to the pub, just last week, a girl in a public school, government school, wore a t-shirt saying, "Virginity rocks." They made her take it off. You can't talk about virginity here. You can't say you're going to wait until marriage. We can tell you about condoms and all that, but you can't talk about being a virgin and say that that's good, because somebody might feel uncomfortable. Like your sex ed classes don't make them uncomfortable. I mean, talk about loss of freedom when you get rid of the truth. These are examples. And you can watch the news and multiply these. Coaches getting suspended for saying a prayer with his, quietly, saying a prayer with the players. Suspended for that. Kid getting suspended from kindergarten because he gave pencils to his classmates saying, Jesus loves you. Oh, that wily 5-year-old undercutting the government. Yeah, you lose the truth, you lose freedom. And that's what we've got going. I'm going to take a break because I'm losing my freedom to keep talking. So we'll come back in 2 minutes and get your questions and those from our studio audience and your emails. So please stay with us. All right, welcome back. First of all, I want to thank all these folks who came in a bus all the way from Philadelphia area. That's a good long way. But did they bring me pretzels? No. It's all right. It's all right. I'll pass over in silence. But we'd love to have you come and join us with or without pretzels. And please contact our pilgrimage department, and they'll give you information about different scheduling for the programs, the masses, and directions to Huntsville, and all sorts of other things around here. Places to stay, places to eat. You can have some Alabama food. Fried green tomatoes are good. And the phone number of the pilgrimage department is 205-271-2966. Or you can go to the website EWTN.com. And I'm still planning on taking a pilgrimage group to the Holy Land December 15th until the 26th. And as in past years, we spend all day Christmas Eve in Bethlehem. So, which has been a delight, in having, Mass usually at the Shepherd's Field, which is it's really cool because you're outside. Sometimes you're in the cave, sometimes you're outside, but it's been really a delight to do that. So if you can join us, either go to my website, fathermitchpacwa.org, and Father is spelled out, fathermitchpacwa.org, or you can call the travel agent, 1-800-554-4556. Also want to give a special welcome to a group from St. Mary Magdalene Parish over in, is it Medea? Media, okay, just like the regular English word. Media, Pennsylvania, just outside Philadelphia, because they also have some relatives of our newest live show host, Jim Pinto, and co-host with his wife, Joy. So I guess they're kinfolk to her too. And so we're glad to have you there, and their pastor as well. All right, let's take a look at our first caller. Hello, David?
Yes.
Hi, where are you from?
I'm from Connecticut.
All right, and your question?
Can you prove to me that God actually exists?
Yes. Now, there's going to be a little more time than I can go through right now for all, because we have a lot of calls. But first of all, one of the questions I would want to know is, what kind of evidence are you looking for?
Any kind of evidence. I don't see that there is any.
Yeah, okay, what do you mean that you don't see that there's evidence?
Well, I can't detect him with any of my five senses or any way that in the world that's used to measure.
Okay, now see that's one of the things that is very important to get at in terms of understanding this, because on one hand, it's just like the fact that you are alive, right? You know you're alive, correct?
Right.
Right, and I know I'm alive. But have you ever been with somebody when they died?
Yes.
And one of the things that you can see is that at one moment they're alive, and then they're not alive, and their body becomes cold, correct?
Correct.
Now, the difference of being alive or dead is not anything that can be measured. There have been a number of attempts to measure the soul by weight, because you can't see that life principle. You can measure if the heart is beating, if blood is being pumped, if the lungs are breathing, that you can measure. But there is a component of the human person you cannot measure. But when it's not there, the measurable functions are not working. So this is one of the issues, David, is that you're asking about the existence of God who cannot be measured. We don't look for him. As a matter of fact, that's part of the definition of God. He is not material. You can only use your senses to detect material things and to try to detect either the human soul or God is not going to work. So it'd be and that's one reason I wanted to ask you these things, because that's the wrong starting point. But let's try something, because I'm sure that you're a person who appreciates, science, as I do. I don't understand it real well, but I love what scientists do, and I only wish I did know it better. It's a difficult way for me to think, just like a lot of my science friends have difficulty studying languages. I have difficulty dealing with science. Languages come more easily. But let's take a look at something from science. There have been, as a matter of fact, the Greek understanding that has dominated many of our scientists is that the material universe is eternal. You see this, for instance, not only among some of the ancient Greeks, but also Einstein held that theory, that the physical universe was always in existence. Mormons hold that. They're the same principle that Einstein once held. However, Lemaitre proved, not only to himself and his immediate colleagues, but later on shocked Einstein by proving to him that there was a Big Bang. Now, the reason that is important is that it means for Einstein that the physical universe did not always exist. And the basis for Lemaitre's theory is that the universe is ever expanding, as Einstein noted. But then Lemaitre pulled that back and said, wait a minute, here's the way that it's expanding. And when you go backward, and again, this is all through very complicated formula that I can't explain, that's beyond my ability. But there is a beginning of the universe. There's a point at which nothing existed, and then everything existed. Now, I don't know how to measure the amount of time in that, but there was a point some 14 billion years ago when the physical universe did not exist. And then there is this existence of the physical universe. Now, again, you and I can't sense that. This is theorists in physics who do understand these things. And they've worked it through, so even in that scientific evidence, it's hard for us to detect without complicated formula in physics, as well as observations of the speed of light and expansion of the universe. Okay? But this is what they determined. Now, and eventually, like I said, Lemaitre, who, by the way, was a Jesuit priest that came up with the Big Bang Theory. He didn't call it that, called it later on. But he came up with that. And then there are two postulates you then have to deal with. That how can everything come into being out of nothing? When there was at one point nothingness, and then there's everything. Second point, and this is one of the things I want you to think about, David, is that there are about 20 factors, and I urge you to take a look at some of these factors in physics, like the speed of light and so on, and that those, if any one of them, yet all of them, were ever so slightly off, something like 1 to the, I forget how many decimal points it is, but 1 to the quadrillionth and so on. If they were off even that much, the universe could not exist. It's not one of those, it's about 20. Now, that indicates not only had there to be an origin for what didn't exist, but that there is also intellect inside that explosion, the Big Bang, that makes the universe possible. So that the fact that you can detect and feel things and see things, all those criteria used are only possible because these other principles exist. And one can only conclude that someone powerful enough to have everything come out of nothing and intelligent enough to know what those precise calculations are, and then still powerful enough to enact them. All of that had to be for you to be able to detect by your seeing, hearing, taste, and touch. That would be some of the things I would start. And I'd also urge you, David, to take a look. There are other arguments that are very profound. There's a book called The Last Superstition by Edward Feser, F-E-S-E-R. I urge you to take a look at that and follow his arguments. All right. Long answer, sorry, but we'll take it one from the studio audience. Father, where are you from?
Monsignor Ralph Chiefo from St. Mary Magdalene. And
so you're the one we're talking about.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And your question?
My question is that, just to answer David too a little bit, is that I always like what Helen Keller said. Even though she was blind, deaf, and dumb, she said the most beautiful things in life you can't feel or touch, but only felt by the love of the heart. So when we feel the love of God. But good Jesuit spiritual director, Father Diamond, taught me many years ago, the truth sets you free, but first makes you miserable. So you got to be a little misery in life. And the misery that I feel today, while we're certainly concerned about all the persecuted Christians in the world, as well as the death of these innocent newsmen, is that we've not connected it too much with the abortion issue, where here in our country, over 3,000 children, as you know, are not given the gift of life. And as you said so beautifully,
that's on a daily basis.
On a daily basis, is that also the increasing violence that happens when we don't respect life at all. So that if you could connect the dots, as you always do so beautifully as a good Jesuit.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that instead of just pointing to the folks over at ISIS, or ISIL as they're calling themselves now, pointing to the terrorists and saying how awful they are. I mean, abortion is a miserable way to die. The terrorists are cutting off heads. The abortionists first cut off arms and legs and then crush the skull. I mean, look at the behavior. They're both wicked deeds. And so we have to say, we are also allowing horrors inside the wombs. And, even as a government, we are telling other countries, we'll give you money and food if you let us teach your women to reject their children and abort them or contracept them. Who does that? That's evil. It's evil. So this is the kind of thing we have to say. There are many ways in which we're not any better. So let's do both. Try to end the terrorism, both inside the wombs and also outside in the world. Well, we're out of time. May the Lord bless you and keep you, cause his face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. And remember, this network is brought to you by you, so please keep us in between your gas bill, your electric bill, and your cable bill, and we'll be able to pay all of our bills too. Thank you, and God bless.